Hey, AP Comp Sci students, we're gonna go through this constructors review. It may be 2 videos depending on how long the first one is. I'll try to keep it under 30 minutes. If I feel like it's gonna go longer than that, we'll just turn it into 2 videos. All right, so starting out with number 1, we have the car class will contain 2 string attributes for a car's make and model. The class will also contain a constructor. So remember, constructor is just the same thing as the class name, and it's how we make objects, in this case of the type car. And we're answering the question of which of the following replacements for this missing code is the most appropriate implementation of the class. So remember, generally speaking, for constructors, we want our instance variables to be private and our constructor itself to be public. So that's going to make A incorrect because we don't want these variables make and model to be public. B is going to be incorrect because a constructor can't be private if you're going to make a car object. C is going to be the correct answer because we have private variables and a public constructor. D and E both have private constructors, which are going to make those incorrect. So C is going to be the correct answer. For number 2, allow me to take the staple out of this thing. This packet is pretty thick. Get this staple out. All right, here we go. So then for number 2, so we have a date class that contains 3 int attributes, day, month, and year. So these are going to be our instance variables. We have day, month, and year, a constructor, and a set date method. The set date method is intended to be accessed outside the class. So what that means is this set date method probably needs to be public if it's going to be accessed outside the class. That's going to point to the word public. So we need to see which one of these is going to be the proper implementation. So remember, our date method needs to be public. So if we're looking at A, these are all of the options. Everything's private, so that's going to be an automatic red flag. For B, we have a private, the 3 instance variables are private, the constructor is public, and the method is private. So B is also going to be incorrect. For C, we have, where can I separate this? Right here. So we have private instance variables, a public constructor, and a public method for a set date. That's probably going to be our correct answer because the variables are private as needed. The date is public. The constructor for date is public, and so is the set date method. For D, we have public variables, so that's going to mark D out. And for E, we also have public variables, so that's going to mark that out as well. For number 3, we have the player class is going to contain 2 int attributes and a constructor. The class has a method getScore that can be accessed from outside the class. That's another indicator that the method should be public, and we need to figure out which missing code that we need to supply this. So let's see, for A, we have private for the method. That's not going to work. Constructor is also private. These are the red flags, the constructor and the method. For B, we have a private int, public, constructor, private, method. So this is going to be the red flag here. So B can't be correct. For C, we have a private int for score, private int for ID, public constructor, and a public getScore method. So checks out. So C is going to be our correct answer here. Again, for D and E, the method getScore cannot be, well, you can have a private method, but in the case of needing to be accessed outside the class, the method needs to be public. So D is going to be incorrect because the method is private. And E is going to be incorrect because the instance variables are public. So then for number 4, let's see, where are we in here? So number 4, we have a rental car class where we have our instance variables, our daily rate and mileage rate. The constructor is a public rental car is going to take 2 parameters of daily and mileage. Both of those are doubles. You can see that we assign the instance variables to the parameters passed to the constructor. And then we have this method, calculate fee, that takes days and miles as inputs. So the calculate fee method is intended to calculate a total fee for renting a car. The total fee is equal to the number of days times the daily rental rate plus the number of miles driven, miles times the per mile rate. So basically we have this formula where we should have days times day rate plus miles times mile rate. And so we're trying to figure out the implementation of calculate fee here. So we needed to return something, one, because it's a double method, so it needs to return a double. That's going to be key. So all of these do have a return statement. So we don't want to just return daily rate plus mileage rate, because it clearly tells us that we have days times plus miles times mile rate. So A is going to be incorrect. For B, we need to return, now daily rate is going to be a variable times days. So what we're really looking for is daily rate times days plus mileage rate times miles. So that's going to be D as our correct answer. C won't be correct because when it says return daily times days, daily is the parameter here. But remember, for classes and objects, you're always pointing to the instance variables in this case, and the parameters passed to a particular method. So daily and days will be multiplying the 2 parameters of the constructor and the method, but what we actually need is daily rate times days and mileage rate times miles. So it's going to be D as our correct answer. The reason the answer can't be E is because days plus miles times daily rate plus mileage rate is just the incorrect formula. For number 5, we have one of these, 1, 2, or 3, which one is correct? So we have this class point where we have 2 instance variables, X and Y, X coordinate and Y coordinate, and we have 2 constructors. One constructor makes a default point of 0, 0, and the second constructor sets a point somewhere that's not the origin at point A, B. And then we have this class circle that has a private point as a center. So it's going to use this class. Then it has a private double radius. And notice that the circle class only has 1 constructor, and that constructor has to take a double A, B, and a radius R as its parameters. So we have to figure out which code would actually work. So seemingly 1 would work because it creates a point. The constructor for center equals new point, that works out if we were to put it inside here and radius R. The problem is that the constructor has to have 3 parameters. And for 1, it doesn't actually have that. So 1 can't work. For 2, if we declare inside the constructor center needs to equal new point AB, well, that's going to work because we have a double A and a double B, and that's going to set these values based upon what happens right here. So when we declare center equals new point AB, then that's going to jump down to this constructor and set X equals A and Y equals B. So 2 actually works, and 3 does not work because even though center equals new point, and then we try to actually update the values of X and Y to A and B, that's not going to be possible because X and Y are private variables, and you can't directly set those values if they're not public. If X and Y were public variables up here, then you actually can access those instance variables using a dot method. But again, because they're private, 3 doesn't work. The radius R is going to work for all of these because R is made inside the class. So it's easy to set the radius variable equal to R here, but you can't change those points for the point class without having a method to do so. So only 2 works here. And so that's going to make B the correct answer. For number 6, all right, so actually we haven't done the comparable method yet. So we're going to skip this one. And when we talk about abstract classes, interfaces, and the comparable method, we'll come back to a question like this. So for number 7, we have this public void. This is just a method question, not a question about constructors, really. We have, let's see, we have public void changer string x as a parameter and integer y as a parameter. And so x equals x plus the string piece and y equals y times 2. And then we have this public void test and string s equals world, int n equals 6. And then you have this method changer sn. And the question is, what is, when call test is executed, when the call to test is executed, what are the values of s and n at the point indicated by end of method? So when we pass this parameter s and n, so what happens is x equals x plus piece, and y is going to be y times 2. But because s and n only live inside this method, even when you call this, nothing actually changes about s and n. Like inside this code, x is going to be world piece is what we're going to get. We're going to get world piece. And then we're going to have, in the 6, so we're going to have 6 times 2, and so we get 12. But because s and n only live inside the method for test, they can't be changed outside of that method. These are like local variables, so they don't exist. S and n themselves don't exist inside the changer method. A reference to them exists inside here where we would still get world piece and 12, but doing that doesn't change the value of s and n here. So what we expect is that we should get, now this is a poor notation by the College Board in my opinion. They're saying s and n should equal whatever they started out as, which would be world and 6. So that's going to make A our correct answer. But it should just be world 6 or something like that, or world space 6 or something. But the answer is just world and 6. And 8 is a similar kind of question where you have 2 different methods where you have one void method called change it, where you take an integer array as a parameter, some int called val as a parameter, and a string word as the last parameter. And inside there, you're going to create an array that has 5 integers. Val is going to be set to 0, and word is going to be the first 6 letters. So, well, up to the 6th letter, not including the 6th letter. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the first 5 letters actually. And so then you're going to have a for loop where you're going to go up to the length of the array, and the array value is going to be 0. So what we would expect is for this int array nums that contains values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and value equals 6, and string equal Blackboard, we're going to have change it, and we're going to have nums, value, and name. So you're going to pass this, array here, and you're going to create a new array. Val is going to be 0, and word.substring for Blackboard. What we would expect to get is the first 5 letters of Blackboard, which would just be black. We would expect val to turn into 0, and we would expect nums based on this for loop to set every value of the array equal to 0. So we'd expect to get 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And so when it says print nums k plus space, we would expect to have 0 space 0 space 0 space 0 space, and then we want to print value, which according to this method should set to be 0. So we're going to have another 0, and then we're going to print name, but name should just be the substring of Blackboard, which would be black. And so all of that seems like it should work out pretty well. We call the method, change it, do all of this stuff, and we should get this. The problem is, again, that these variables live inside this method, and using them in some method outside of that doesn't change the value. Like if we had a class where we set those values, that would change. So this is the output you think you would get, but actually all you're going to get is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in Blackboard, because nothing inside this method changed the values of num, value, or name. So the actual correct answer is going to be E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Blackboard. This is one where I would encourage you to type it up. Now, if you actually change, if you returned, let's talk about that for a moment. If you returned a value from here to change the value of nums, like if we had this return nums and updated that, then you could actually change this in another method. But because these are void methods, they're just going to do something and not actually change this value for something else. You'd have to return it and store it as something to do that, or at least print a reference. But we don't do any of that, so the variables do not change. For number 9, we have, we have a person class. That person class uses the instance variable adult to indicate whether a person is an adult or not. You don't actually need it or not. You can just say whether the person is an adult. So we have public class person. We have these 3 instance variables of name, age, and adult. We have a constructor that takes 2 parameters, N, I'm assuming, for name, and A for age. And then we have this Boolean variable that's going to flag based upon the person's age. If the person is older than 18, it's going to be true that they're an adult. If the person is under 18, it's going to be false that they're an adult. And we want to know which of the following statements will create a person object that represents an adult person. So our options are, let's see if we can keep the constructor and the answers in view all together. Let me zoom out a little bit. So when we're looking at this, to create a new object, we need the actual name of the object, the actual class of the object. So in this case, person, whatever you want to call that object, equals new name of the type of object, and whatever parameters we have to pass. So if we pass Homer and adult, the second parameter needs to be an int, so A can't work. B, we have P equals new person, Homer, and an age that's above 18. So that's going to return an adult because we have a string, we have an int. C doesn't work because we have 2 strings. String 23 is not the same as an int 23. The second parameter needs to be an int again, so Boolean value won't work. And for E, we have a string for Homer and an age that is an int 17, but we want to have an adult, so the age needs to be greater than or equal to 18. So this, even though it creates a proper person, E doesn't work. These 3, A, C, and D, all would actually create compile errors because the right type of parameter is not passed for the second parameter. So this, if you had these lines of code for A, C, and D, your code won't even compile because they don't have the right parameters. For number 10, just going through a lot of papers. Let's see, we have an item class that will store the item's name as item name, the item's regular price in dollars is regular price, and the discount that is applied to the regular price when this item is on sale as discount percent. For example, a discount of 15% is stored in discount percent as 0.15. So we have our class item. We have our 3 instance variables of item name, regular price, and discount percent. And then we have this constructor where in order we take a name, a price, and a discount. So 2 doubles and a string. And then we properly set item name equals. So we set these variables equal to these parameters in this order. And then we have another constructor where we have just the string name, well, the name of the object and the price, and the default is they automatically set their discount percent to 25. So which of the following segments found in a class other than item, which means again that we're just accessing this in like some test class, like in our example where we had the line test where we test this. So, all right, all of these properly declare a new item. We have item B equals new item. Now we're looking for a regular price of 10 and a discount of 25. So 1 is going to work. It has a blanket. 1 is going to use the first array where we have a string, a price, and a discount. We have a string, a price of $10, and a 25% discount. So 1 is going to work. B, we have the other constructor has a name and a price. So we have a blanket and we have a price of 10. And remember, for the 2 parameter constructor, the default discount is 25%. So 2 is also going to work. 3 won't work because the doubles are in different order. This is going to say that the price is 25 cents and the discount is, I guess that would have to be 1,000%, because if it was 1, it would be 100%. So by 10, it's going to be 1,000%. So 3 doesn't work because it's just in the wrong order. And so that's going to make D 1 and 2 only our answers. So for number 11, so we're at 21 minutes if you're watching. So after we get to 12, since there are 24 in here, we're going to cut this off and I'll record another video for 13 through 24. So for number 11, we have this public class bank account where we have a double balance, a private. So this is our instance variable. We have 1 variable balance and we have a method, public double deposit. And this deposit method is supposed to increase the account balance by the deposit amount and then return the updated balance. So remember, it's taking amount as the input. So if you want to increase balance by the amount, you would need some code that is balance equals balance plus amount. So you could either have a line of code that does this, and then you could return balance, or you could literally just return this statement all by itself. I can't remember what this one does, but a good practice is if you don't need to create a variable, just don't. So you can just return this since this variable already exists inside the class. For 11, it's going to, all right, it did the first thing where it said balance equals balance plus amount and then returned amount. D is going to be incorrect because you need to return balance. So E is going to be the correct answer because you have balance equals balance plus amount, and then you return balance. So that's going to be correct. Balance equals the amount is just going to switch out the value, whatever is in balance, and replace it with amount. It does return balance, so that's good, but it's not correct. B returns amount, so it doesn't even do anything. And A, you can't actually set amount equal to balance plus amount and then return amount because that's not going to update the actual balance variable. I mean, technically, I suppose this will return the right value, but that's not going to be what's in your account. So I take that out. So then lastly, for number 12, we have a class password and we have a private string password that has not been initialized, mind you. And we have a public password constructor. So the constructor takes a single parameter called string and it has some parameter PWD for password. So then we have this void method reset. And let's see, so we have this code segment, password P equals new password. So right now we have a password object that has password as its only variable. And then we have this system.out.println line. The new password is, so that we have this string, and then we're going to concatenate that with p.reset password. So now remember, this is a void method. So when you do this, you're trying to reference something. In this case, you're trying to reference something that doesn't exist. Void methods don't return anything, so this doesn't actually do anything. So the proper way to actually do this is either your void method should be this statement, and you could just have the new password is, so we could have a void method where we have all of this, and then we could just have password. And then, but that code would need to be inside this void method in the place of this. But as is, since void methods don't return anything, E is going to be the correct answer, because the only way you can use this p.reset password as a parameter is if that method returns something. So E is going to be our answer, and we'll continue this in a second video.